I'm gonna proceed. That clock's off, so I'm gonna go. Okay. I'm gonna. Sir? Oh, you don't know? We're gonna go now. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As always, I give you your Miranda rights to turn off the sound on your cell phones or other electronic devices. With us today are Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russ Redding, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, the State Treasurer, and Sue Layton, representing Secretary of Revenue Dan Hassel. Thank you all for being here. Call to order. Quorum of the board being present. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today we have one public hearing scheduled regarding the CAT 2 slot machine license renewal application of BethWorks Sands LLC, operating Sands Bethlehem. Can we have the representatives from Sands come forward at this time? Before we begin, I'd remind one that anyone who's going to speak today should please stand and state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. I'd also ask that all non-attorney witnesses please stand and be sworn at this time.
I do. Card. Oh, do I have a card? No, not on me, but I could give you my last name is Magazzu, M-A-G-A-Z-Z-U. First name Michael. Vice President and General Counsel, Sands BethWorks Gaming LLC.
Sands, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. I would just like to take a few seconds to acknowledge the board's welcoming our presence here today to offer our presentation in support of our application for our Category 2 license renewal. I don't have much else to say, but I'd like to turn it over to Brian Carr, who is the president of Sands BethWorks Gaming, who has a relatively brief presentation, which is largely similar to what we offered at the town hall presentation in the city of Bethlehem back in April. So for those board members who weren't able to attend, we hope you enjoy what we have to offer. And of course, if you have any questions when we're done with the presentation, we will do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Brian Carr, C-E-R-R. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Sands Bethlehem. We can switch to the presentation here. Just a reminder, we'll kick it off from this point. Sands BethWorks acquired 124 acres that were part of the former site of Bethlehem Steel. When we took it over in 2007, at that time the property was the largest privately owned brownfield site in the United States. Over the past 9 years, Sands Bethlehem has invested approximately $1 billion in the property versus the original license obligation of $600 million. The coming pages will just take you briefly through some of that investment. Our casino floor opened in May 2009, and as of this month, we have over 3,000 slot machines, 189 tables, and 26 poker tables. The high limit slot area, we just finished a $5.7 million renovation of the high limit table salon area, which is known as Pisa. We just finished a $6 million renovation of our poker room. We spent $7.4 million installing the largest ETG stadiums in the United States. And overall, the total square footage of our casino floor is just over 150,000 square feet. We offer over 3,000 parking spaces in the covered garage for our guests. We have 1,600 surface lots spaces. Valet runs 24 hours a day at 2 different locations. And we have 14 bus bays, which average 81 buses and over 4,000 guests every single day. Last year, it brought more than 1.5 million guests to our property. We've also participated with PennDOT and spent over $100 million in improvements to the 412 artery, which brings the traffic in from 78 to our property. To spend a little time to go through some of our non-gaming amenities. We have a really great partnership with Emeril Lagasse and feature 3 of his restaurants on our property. Emeril's Chop House does over 500,000 guests every single year and is our high-end steakhouse for the property. Last year we spent $1.6 million in our renovation to bring it up to standards and make sure that it continues to be the best steakhouse in the Lehigh Valley area. Emeril's Fish House opened in 2016, and we spent nearly $2 million renovating it almost a year later. It accommodates 257 guests and is a wonderful fish operation, by far the best fish restaurant we've got in Lehigh Valley. You may see a trend in that I think my restaurants are the best in Lehigh Valley. Burgers and More, which is a quick-serve burger operation, which is in our northeast corner of our casino floor. Very popular with our guests. In 2017, we were proud to partner with Buddy V and bring Carlos Bakery to our mall area. It accommodates 31 guests at a time and offers too many pastries that I care to share with all of you about how good they all are. And we also at the same time opened up Buddy V's restaurant, which is his feature restaurant and is our Italian offering, and it's been a huge success just off the casino floor. We also partner with third parties. Villa Enterprises offers both of our food court, our buffet, and also the quick service steelworks. Seating 300 people in the buffet and having in the food court stations that include gourmet coffees, pastries, ice cream, pizza, hot dogs, so on and so forth, and is certainly popular with our guests. Chopsticks is an authentic Chinese restaurant based out of New York City. A great partnership that we have with them, and is definitely a major driver in our bus operations for our Asian guests that we bring in from New York City. Oh, fast there. Molten opened up in 2009 and is our major casino bar that's on the floor. It features live entertainment every single night and is a great gathering place for our guests. Coils, a center bar, accommodates gaming and is another key gathering place for our guests as they come in. Features our specialty cocktails and also the most draft beers that we offer anywhere on the property. Our gift shop, the mall, which is the Outlets at Sands Bethlehem, has over 30 stores. Features 200,000 square feet of shopping experience for our guests, featuring Coach, DKNY, Talbot's, Tommy Hilfiger, etc. We have a full-service spa on property. It's almost 4,500 square feet and offers 10 different treatment rooms. We have banquet and meeting space, which opened in June of 2011. It's 12,000 square feet of modern meeting space with 3,000 square feet of exhibition space. Last year we had 25,000 attendees come to 324 different events that we hosted during the year.
What's the largest number of folks you can accommodate at one time in that?
Well, that depends, because in a couple pages I'll talk about the event center. So the event center is significantly larger, and some of our events will do that. But the event center will hold 2,500 or 3,000 standing, and with the event center, so if you're willing to count as a free flow event that was going to go through different ones, you could easily handle a group of say up to 5,000 if they weren't in the same room at the same time. Which then leads to the event center. Perfect timing right there with this question. So the event center opened up in May 2012. It's a 50,000 square foot featuring A-list artists that we have, DJs, boxing, trade shows, conferences. It also has a nightclub component to it, which is Vision Bar and Nightclub. It features about 80 to 100 shows a year, and it has top-level talent such as we have upcoming like Britney Spears, Jerry Seinfeld, Steven Tyler, and Barry Manilow in just the next coming months. Our hotel, which opened up in May 2011 and got renovated to the tune of almost $12 million in 2016. We have 282 rooms. It features 4 chairman suites. It has 6 presidential suites and 16 executive suites. It has a pool, fitness center, and for running on 4 years straight, we've received the 4 Diamond Reward from AAA. So that kind of summarizes the property and the investments that have been made in the area. Let's spend a little time and kind of talk about the community involvement we've had in the area. So, Arts Quest, PBS 39, and the local city related to the Visitors Center have all benefited by land that's been donated to them to form their foundations. ArtQuest built the Steel Stacks campus, which opened in spring of 2012. PBS 39 developed their Steel Stacks Public Broadcast Center on the west end of the site, which opened up also in 2012. And the Industrial Stockhouse for the Visitors Center related to the trestle, which we'll talk about next. The trestle, we entered into an easement agreement with the Redevelopment Authority of Bethlehem in September of 2013. They built the Hoover Mason trestle. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. It's basically a walking tour of the blast furnaces and kind of takes you through the history of Bethlehem Steel, of exactly how the entire process worked. The Redevelopment Authority spent almost $14 million in the project, and it opened up in the spring of 2015. Steelworkers Archive. We work hand in hand with them. We gave them a wonderful location down on the lower level of our mall where guests can come and visit them and see some of the archive items that they have, and but also to talk to them and get a feeling for the steelworkers. Also give them a place to meet for some of their regular meetings that they schedule. We also work with regional tourism groups in the Lehigh Valley area. These are just a couple examples. Discover Lehigh Valley. We help promote the Chris Kindle Mart, which is a major tourist attraction. Music Fest, which is coming up in just a couple months here. Arts Quest and Welcome to Historic Bethlehem is also a regional partner that we have. From a community involvement and outreach, in 2017 we gave over $600,000 to charity, and life to date we've given more than $3 million. We're a proud sponsor. We work an awful lot with groups such as Arts Quest, Donegan Elementary, which is an underprivileged school that's just up the hill from us, Southside Arts District. We also work with VIA in the Lehigh Valley and the Victory House, which we'll spend a little bit here talking about in the coming pages. From an employment point of view, job creation in the area is probably something I'm the most proud of. We have almost 2,500 team members as of the end of 2017. The average annual compensation, including benefits and tips, is $44,900. The lifetime employee compensation that's paid since we opened is coming up on $700 million. We had 135 promotions in 2017. And the biggest thing about that is seeing people's careers develop from the ground up. When you see frontline team members, and we can walk our floor right now, and I can see, we can walk the floor at a random, at 9 o'clock on a random Tuesday, and I could find you 5 people that are on their 3rd job, and it's because what happens is they come in and they see an opportunity as a security officer, but as they're in the building to over 3,200 people in the Greater Lehigh Valley that are directly linked to take care of our employees, not just with pay, but also with their benefits. SANS pays 88% of all employee costs related to benefits. From a demographics point of view, you'll see on the left the statewide numbers, and SANS excels in both female and minority participation in our leadership roles. And then also from an overall workforce, we're nearly 56% male, 43% female, and 46% minority. In the coming pages, I'll get into a little bit more detail than that. It's just a snapshot. Millennials are taking over my property, if that hasn't happened to you guys yet, from the point I'm nearly 50% millennial workforce right now. And as we said before, what our split by gender is. Here's your split for in-state, out-of-state. You can see that we're 82% in the Lehigh Valley. So not only are we in PA, but we're very concentrated in the local area. Something we're very proud of is our work to help build our workforce from the ground up and continue to offer opportunities to our entry-level individuals. So since 2014, we've had 745 transfers into a different role. We've had 521 promotions. And since 2014, Females have made up 46% of the transfers and 35% of the promotions. Minorities have made up 46% of the transfers and 39% of the promotions. And since 2014, females have seen a 164% increase in director level positions. And just to let you know, it's not a nothing number. We now have 18 females in our director ranks right now. So very pleased with the promotions we've had. And last year, Kathy McCracken, who's our Executive Vice President of Marketing Administration, reached the highest level of Vice President that our company offers. So very excited about her development and also development of the rest of our team. Employment resources. Training is something that's very important to us. Obviously, responsible gaming, CPR for dealers, which is an important thing for guest safety. Working with Northampton Community College for training programs, both in facilities but also in other areas. English as a second language, which has really taken a real bump. Nearly 17% of the Lehigh Valley and nearly 20% of my staff is Hispanic. So that's definitely something that is hugely beneficial for us. We'll talk a little bit about dealer school in a moment. And then employment tours for the Bethlehem School District, which is something we're just kind of starting to get going on, but we're very excited about the potential of it. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second here. So in February 2017, we opened up our first in-house dealer school. We now offer 5 types of games. To date, 208 people have graduated and started employments with the Sands for a graduation rate of almost 62%. 172 of those that graduated that we hired are still with us, which is an 82% retention rate. That's amazing in the dealer ranks. But one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this in-house was so that we could find talent, develop it, and develop it for people that are from the Lehigh Valley area. So that these are people that are more stable, are going to stay with us, and are not, transient moving off to the next casino that's opening up. So hopefully, starting to build this with the local community and making them, for hiring people into these roles that have roots in our community. The reason why this is a huge thing, dealer school is 100% free, and this is a chance for an individual to, after 6 weeks of training, to be eligible to be making $38,000 to $40,000 a year plus benefits. Diversity on this is 56% white, 44% minority. 91% of the dealer school graduates are from Pennsylvania, of which 88% are from the Lehigh Valley. So continuing that story of what we were talking about. As we continue to partner within the community for employment opportunities, VIA of the Lehigh Valley is a wonderful nonprofit agency that provides services for children and adults with disabilities like autism, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome. We're very proud to say that we have 4 team members that they've recommended to us, 2 of which have been employed with us for over 4 years. We also sponsor them as a charitable organization. Our sponsorships include the VIA Marathon, the basketball banquet, and their golf tournaments. The basketball banquet is one of their biggest fundraisers, and one of the things that we do for them is we pay for the speaker that's going to come in and host the night for them. Examples we just had Herschel Walker in this past month, and to date we've donated over $275,000 to VIA's organization. Victory House is another one that's close to my heart, which is Victory provides local homeless veterans and homeless men with opportunities to transition from service into private life. They do an awful lot of great work. Our team goes over and volunteers. This is kind of a halfway house, so you've got individuals living on the property, but also people that are participating in their services that are not staying on the property, but they do a dinner every single night, and so they're constantly in need of help, and our team goes over and helps all the time. And to date, we've also given them $103,000 in donations. Hispanic Center of Lehigh Valley is a local nonprofit that strives to improve the quality of life for Hispanic and other families in Lehigh Valley. To date, we've given them $173,400, and we're tomorrow actually going over to help kick off the opening of their new wing, which is something very exciting for us and for them. And then, like I said before, the Bethlehem Area School District. A very large percentage of the children who graduate from the Bethlehem area schools do not go on to college, at least initially, right off the bat. One of the things that we see as an opportunity is to introduce to them the career opportunities that the casino offers, especially dealer school, like we said, where the median income is significantly below the $38,000 level. So we're giving an individual who's finishing school at 18, they can work in the casino environment at that age. to be able to go through classes 6 weeks, get some training, and be able to be above the median income in the greater Bethlehem area. So definitely something that we're doing to help boost success in those areas. We've participated in job fairs at Freedom and Liberty High School, which are the two major high schools right there. We've held tours with the guidance counselors and expo days at the VOTEC, and we're looking forward to actually hosting them today for more VOTEC counselors to come in and understand how do we start to get in front of these children earlier on so they can start to learn the math skills and things that they need to get into some of these better performing jobs. Regulatory compliance, just want to spend a little bit of time about our dedication to this. So prevention of minors on the casino floor is something that we're extremely dedicated on. We recently implemented back in March of 2017 the Veridoc system, which is a scanning system for IDs, and it's something we've seen tremendous success with. As you know, we average about 9 million people a year in visitation. That's 25,000 people a day. That's an awful lot of people to sort through and make sure that we're keeping minors off the floor. We had over almost 900,000 challenges at our entrances, and since the implementation of the new system, we saw an increase of catching fake IDs by 58%, and underage incidents reduced from 29 to 6 over a course of a year. You can just see down below some examples of some of the signage, basically letting it be known long before anybody ever gets to the turnstiles that we take this seriously, and the focus for the security team is to make sure that that number continues to fall. Mitigation of compulsive gambling is something we continue to focus on. We provide level 1 and level 2 problem gambling treatment training to the community. This series has been offered every year since 2006. And over 3,500 people have received their certification through the training that we've provided. Spend a little time just talking about some of the financials and what the property's been able to do since 2014. Since 2014, we've managed to grow our gaming revenue 16.1%. That makes us number 1 in table game revenue for 2017, number 2 in slot revenue for 2017, and number 2 overall in gross gaming revenue in the state. And with that comes a benefit to the state, which is a 12.7% growth in the taxes we've paid since 2017. The one we can just skip to the bottom is total gaming taxes increased 22.9 million, or almost 13% during this time. And lifetime through December of 2017, Sands Bethlehem has paid 1.5 billion in gaming taxes and nearly 75 million in fees and administrative costs. Just a quick breakdown of what that meant to the local community. So the local community with the share breakdown was $143.2 million to the greater local area surrounding Bethlehem. And then in addition to that, we paid another $110 million between property taxes, sales taxes, unemployment taxes, and hotel occupancy taxes. And with that, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to appear today, and we are available for any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Questions from Enforcement Council?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. We do have a few questions for the SANS representatives, please. I'd like to direct your attention first to slide number 5. And on that slide, in bullet point number 2, you state that in May of 2018, SANS will have 3,053 slots, 189 table games, and 26 poker tables. Additionally, the last bullet point, you state that the floor will be 150,709 square feet. Are all of those changes related to Operational Plan 23, which was approved by the board on February 13th, 2018?
They are.
And I believe you alluded to this already, but since it is now the close of May 2018, have all those changes been implemented? And if not, what do you anticipate the completion date to be?
The completion date should be any day now. It literally is a couple slot machines that were shipped with the wrong software on them. So once they get upgraded, those will go live. So the square footage is right, and that is already done. The tables are right, that's already done. And there's a handful, I want to say it's like 4 slot machines is what the difference is.
Next, I'd ask you to turn to slide 6. You provided information regarding the improvements to the roadway system around the SANS facility. Specifically, this is State Route 412, State Route 378. Have both of those projects been fully completed?
Yes, they were completed a couple years back.
Okay, next please, slide 19. You present information here about the outlets at SANS. Do you know how many storefronts are presently open?
Well, there's 30 stores, 26 are occupied.
And do you anticipate any new tenants coming to the outlets in the foreseeable future?
We have 2 that we're working on deals right now with, yes.
Next slide, 31, please. Here you state that Sands had 2,473 employees at the close of 2017. Is that number still accurate today?
Yes.
And do you foresee any changes to the number of employees at Sands in the near future?
Not in the near future, but over the coming year, I would hope that that number will continue to grow.
And do the full-time positions at Sands still have a benefit package, and does that include health care?
Yes.
Next slide, 37. Here you discuss your dealer school. You state that the graduation rate for the program is 62%. Can you provide some insight as to what are some of the biggest factors contributing to an individual not graduating, like dropping out, lack of math skills, those type of items?
Dropping out is a big one, and then the math skills is definitely the thing we struggle. That's why when we went to and we started discussing with the Bethlehem School District, the focus that we had was individuals that they thought would be good candidates, making sure that they understood some of the basic math that was required for it.
Slide 42, please. Here you provide information about the prevention of underage patrons. Is Sands still utilizing the same identification verification system that was installed in March of 2017? I think you said that was Veridox.
Yes.
And is that system regularly updated?
It is updated every week, yes.
And without going into specifics, are there any other general tactics that Sands utilizes to prevent underage patrons from accessing its gaming floor?
Yeah, I mean, we continue to work with not only the security department, but also beverage service, slots, tables, which are the areas in the casino area too. And I realize that it's also their job to identify and not just assume because somebody's made it onto the floor that they should just assume that they are 21 years old. So there's a challenge process, there's a wristbanding process that can be done. We also work in the restaurants where we've got some cards where we hand out to guests when they come in and they've got a minor with them to explain to them that they cannot leave the restaurant without a security escort, because that is something we've had a couple instances of individuals taking a child to the bathroom not realizing that they had to check in and get somebody to walk them over there.
Okay, in the third bullet point on this slide, you present there have been 898,957 challenges at the entrances. What time frame does that cover?
Do you remember the time frame? Is that the year?
I think that's lifetime. I believe.
And then under
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Sorry,
We couldn't hear that
I think
exchange
that's
up here.
lifetime. I don't think that's just for the year.
Okay, and then under the fourth bullet point of that same slide, you indicate there have been an increase of 58% in the number of fake identifications which have been caught and turned away. Can you possibly quantify that for the board?
Yeah, I think we reported 58% when we had the April 5th hearing, and Mr. Rowland, I remember you asking the same or similar question then, and we got those figures and actually verified them this morning. And so we implemented this new scanning system with the what we would call the more robust or fully equipped Veridox scanners in mid-March of 2017. And so we did a 1-year look back from that period and then looked forward 1 year to do a comparison. And so in the 1 year prior to that date of implementation, we caught and turned away 27 fake IDs. And when I say fake IDs, what I mean are illegitimate IDs, not legitimate IDs of someone else. So an illegitimate ID that may have passed the handheld scanner test prior to the implementation of that system, but because of the implementation of that improved system, we were able to catch those fake IDs. And so that's why we thought it was important to look at the 1 year prior and the 1 year subsequent. And so in that 1 year prior, it was 27 that we caught, and then the 1 year after, it was 52, which would be obviously a higher number than that 58%, but I believe that to be more exact than what we report here with
Thank
the
you.
58% number.
And then at the April 5th, 2018 public renewal hearing in Bethlehem, you confirmed that Sands still continues to provide an underage pathway around the perimeter of its gaming floor. Can you please explain again how that process works?
Sure. So a guest comes to the entrance, requests to enter the casino floor to go to one of the restaurants or to walk over to one of the other areas. So if you'd come in, say, the main valet area and you were going where the food court was, you would have to walk along the underage pathway, which heads up the south side of the casino, heads along the west end until you get to the food court area. A security will radio in for a rover who comes over and escorts the individuals with the children along that pathway, and then registers it as a call when they escort them to that point. And then obviously when they were going to come back, they would do the exact opposite.
Okay, looking towards future growth, what is Sands' position on the number of slot machines, table games, and/or the size of its gaming floor? And specifically, I'm asking you if you anticipate growing or reducing your gaming floor, if you're increasing or decreasing the products on the gaming floor, or if you're expanding the types of games offered.
You know, we continue to cap out from a table point of view, especially even at the ETGs, which is why you've seen us grow them over the last 2 years. I would anticipate continued growth. I feel good about where our slot number is, although I wouldn't be surprised if that grew a little bit as we continue to reconfigure spaces. The board may remember from OP23 and 24 that we've got pending that's coming in. We reconfigured our floor. We moved our poker room and backfilled that area with more table games and more slot machines. We moved where we had our car giveaway on the casino floor to an unused portion of the entrance so that we could backfill that area with more table games. As we continue to look at what our guests are asking for, we continue to find how to best maximize that 151,000 square feet, which it's hard to believe that 151,000 square feet doesn't feel like enough, but it's a good situation to be in. And so I would say, if anything, I would see us continue to grow, and I'm actively looking at new ways to continue to expand the floor.
And then given the existing competition already in place in the Northeast region, and by that I mean Maryland, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Massachusetts, the recent purchase of Empire City Casino by MGM in New York, the possible expansion of gaming in New York City in 2021, what plans does Sands have in place to combat future competition and ensure its future viability?
I think the thing that we're constantly looking at is what we've been doing for the last 3 years, where you've seen the growth on the properties. How do we continue to be the provider of choice to our guests, especially out of the New York area? We've been very successful to date. The renovation of the hotel has been very successful, helped us mitigate some of the additional risks that came on because of the Atlantic City expansions. We also have been able to weather the storm very well for the resorts world and have not really felt much of an impact at all. Year over year. And as we continue to think about future growth into the rest of the facility, I think the number one thing is how do we turn it more into a resort destination and that getaway for our guests, which is something that will probably continue to be the competitive advantage for us going forward.
Okay. And lastly, do you have any plans to add or remove amenities at the facility?
Not that I'm ready to speak to today, but I will say I have several options that we're looking at right now.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I did have an opportunity to attend the public hearing, and so I learned a lot there as well. And I just want to comment on the community support that came out to testify as to the positive impact you've had, and I compliment you for that. But I do want to concentrate a little bit more today on, you had a slide there about your compulsive gambling training. It was towards the end. And you talked about providing problem level 1 and 2, which I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means. I'd like you to explain it. Problem gambling treatment for professionals, and talked about training professionals. And I got the impression from the slide that you were training like community professionals. So I'd like to understand a little bit more exactly what you're doing there. And then as a follow-up, I'd also like to know what kind of training, if any, to recognize folks with a gambling problem that you do with your own employees or associates.
So I'll take the last part of that first, because it's something that we do. So responsible gaming is something that is trained to every employee when they come in the door for new hire every single time. That is also renewed every single year where they go through it. All employees are aware and know where their contacts are if an individual makes comments to them, or they have concerns for whatever reason, or something comes to our attention regarding an individual patron about how we would get them assistance, how we would give them information about where they could get assistance, and moving from there. So that's the employee part of it. Level 1 and Level 2 problem gaming treatment training is really a certification that you'll see in local areas, which could be local community counselors, it could be church individuals, it could be any one of a large group. Off the top of my head, I won't even try to run through the list. I would have no problem pulling our records of who's attended and sending it off to the board from that point if you'd like further details on that.
I would, and I don't know if you also could answer this, but I would be interested from whoever does that training for your community folks, what kind of feedback they get from community folks as to whether or not they think the resources to treat problem gambling are adequate in the community.
So the training is done by the PA Council of Compulsive Gaming. It's not my team doing it. We just simply
So you're
fund
hosting.
it. And
Oh,
we
okay.
host it and we fund for the training to be done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Enforcement Council, do you have any presentation?
The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have a public presentation. However, at this time, OEC would like to amend its exhibit list to introduce into the record in addition to OEC Exhibit Number 1, which is the Uniform Crime Reporting System report for SANS. That amendment will include statistics for March and April of 2018. Second would be in addition to OEC Exhibit 7, which is a copy of the Office of Enforcement Counsel warning letters issued to SANS along with the responses submitted by SANS. The amendment today includes 9 additional warning letters and the submitted responses, which have been marked confidential pursuant to Section 1206 F1, 3, and 4. Finally, SANS Bethworks Gaming LLC, along with its affiliates and principals, filed renewal applications with the board, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its background investigation related to these applications. SANS fully cooperated with BIE during the course of the background investigation. BIE did not identify any information that would preclude a finding of suitability or financial fitness of SANS, its principals, or its affiliates. The background investigation reports have been submitted as part of SANS suitability report to the board for consideration. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel will be happy to answer any questions the board may have in this regard.
Thank you very much. Does SANS have any questions for OEC?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, I want to thank you for your time, and there will be a vote on this matter later today under the Bureau of Licensing section of the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, May 29th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that are being considered today by the board. Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes of the April 4th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes of the April 4th, 2018 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Executive Director's Report. Kevin?
Good morning, Chairman Barish. Good morning, members of the board. For today's Executive Director report, I would like to address sports wagering and the initial step that needs to be accomplished by the Gaming Control Board in order to move forward in the process for Pennsylvania casinos to be able to offer this new gaming initiative to players in Pennsylvania. To comply with Section 13C 11B, the board shall publish a notice in the Pennsylvania Bulletin announcing that federal law now authorizes a state to regulate sports wagering. On May 14, 2018, the Supreme Court of the United States issued an opinion in Murphy et al. Versus NCAA et al., which provides authorization for states such as Pennsylvania to regulate sports wagering within the Commonwealth. Additionally, temporary regulations will be presented to the board in just a few minutes, which, if approved by the board, will begin the process to regulate sports wagering activity. At this time, Chairman, I request a motion to publish a notice in the Pennsylvania Bulletin.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board publish a notice in the Pennsylvania Bulletin announcing that the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Murphy et al. Versus NCAA et al., struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, thereby allowing for the legalization of sports wagering in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Anything else, Kevin? Or is
No,
that it?
thank you, Chairman.
In conjunction with the board moving forward with developing a comprehensive system of regulations to govern sports wagering, I'd like to announce that the board will be accepting comment from any and all interested entities or persons relating to concerns or items which those persons believe the board should take into consideration as we promulgate our temporary regulations. Any matters submitted to the board for its consideration in regard to these regulations should be submitted to the board's secretary, Pam Lewis, by June 15th, 2018. Upon receipt, the board will place all comments received on its public website. Now we will hear from Danette Bixler-George, head of HR, regarding personnel matters. Good morning, Danette.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 3 individuals. First, Richard Riley Bramble has been selected as a casino compliance representative at the Mount Area Casino under the Bureau of Casino Compliance. Mr. Bramble has completed the interview process, background check, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Director of Casino Compliance, Gerald Stahl. Second is Samantha Laird, who has been selected as an investigator in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. She has completed the interview process, background check, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement's Deputy Director, Michelle Seo. And finally, Nikki Philby has been selected as a licensing technician in the Bureau of Licensing. She too has completed the interview process, background check, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by the Director of Licensing, Susan Hensel. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the hiring actions as indicated.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to a temporary regulation which has been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. Senior Counsel Laura Bird is here to present that temporary regulation which pertains to the topic of sports wagering for your consideration. And as Laura will explain, this is the first and probably most basic regulation to come. We anticipate that many more will be coming over the next 2 or 3 meetings to give you a comprehensive set.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Our next agenda item are temporary regulations related to sports wagering, number 125-216. The Office of Chief Counsel presents for the board's consideration this regulation, which will begin the process of implementing sports wagering in the Commonwealth. This packet contains definitions related to sports wagering in the Commonwealth, including the types of licenses that will be required to participate in the industry. Also included in this packet are the requirements for slot machine licensees to file petitions with the board to acquire a sports wagering certificate. The board will begin accepting these petitions upon adoption of these regulations. In mid-June, the board will begin accepting applications for related entities which will be involved in implementing sports wagering in conjunction with sports slot machine licensees. My apologies. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have relative to this regulatory packet. If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve temporary regulation 125-216.
Thanks, Laura. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve temporary regulation 125-216 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.
Next, the board has 5 petitions before it for consideration. All of the petitions can be decided based upon the record by agreement of the parties. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with the full evidentiary record and all documents filed within the hearings and appeals docket. The first petition is that of the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to place William Forte on the involuntary exclusion list. On February 25th of 2017, while at Sands Casino, Mr. Forte was confronted by security based upon his conduct, was escorted to the main entrance, and while the state police were called, while waiting for the state police, Mr. Forte physically accosted a Sands employee, and as a result, he was arrested and criminally charged with assault, public drunkenness, and related offenses. Mr. Forte was subsequently admitted into an accelerated rehabilitative disposition program for a 3-month period and permanently evicted from the Sands Casino. A hearing in the matter was scheduled. However, Mr. Forte subsequently withdrew his request for a hearing. The matter is now appropriate for the board to decide based upon the documents of record.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the petition placing William Forte on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board is Iwa Derma's petition for removal from the involuntary exclusion list. On July 12, 2017, the board placed Ms. Derma on the involuntary exclusion list after it was shown that while gaming at parks a year earlier in 2016, she capped her wagers on several occasions, resulting in her winning $55 to which she was not entitled. She was charged criminally and subsequently admitted into an ARD program directed to make restitution to parks and to perform 10 hours of community service. Ms. Derma has indicated that she has completed the ARD program in December 2017, provided a copy of the court order indicating her successful completion, and that all charges have been expunged. Based upon her completion of that program, the fact that the matter involved was a small dollar amount, and OEC's contention that a language barrier may have contributed to the incident in question, OEC has not objected to the grant of the request from the exclusion list, and that's the matter now before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Iwa Derma's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Natalie Bono's petition for removal from the involuntary exclusion list is the next matter before the board. On August 2016, Ms. Bono, who was 20 years old at the time, attempted to enter Mount Airy Casino by providing a false identification to security. She was not permitted onto the gaming floor and was permanently evicted from Mount Airy. As a result of her actions, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition requesting that Ms. Bono be placed on the exclusion list. Subsequently, Ms. Bono and OEC entered into a consent agreement in which she would be placed on the list until at least her 22nd birthday, which was April 3rd of this year. Ms. Bono, who, as indicated, is now 22 years of age, is requesting removal. OEC has no objection, and that's the request before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Natalie Bono's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Brittany Glass's request to lift the suspension of her gaming employee occupation permit. By way of background, Ms. Glass was issued a gaming permit on November 9th, 2015, and worked as a table game dealer at Harrah's. In April 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel was notified that Ms. Glass was charged with 2 felonies and 2 misdemeanors for involvement in the theft of motor vehicles. Specifically, she was involved in a conspiracy with 31 other people to rent motor vehicles that claimed they were stolen while rented, when in fact they were retitled and sold. An emergency order suspending her permit was signed by the board's executive director in April 2016. A hearing was held at the board's Office of Hearings and Appeals in May of 2016, and the board subsequently issued an order in August 2016 continuing the suspension of her license. In October 2016, Ms. Glass filed a petition to lift the suspension of her gaming employee permit. OEC objected. A hearing was held, and ultimately the board determined to continue the suspension until such time as she successfully completed an ARD program. On May 1st of this year, Ms. Glass filed another petition requesting the board lift the suspension and has provided documentation showing that she completed the ARD program and that her criminal record was expunged. Based upon that, OEC has not objected to the request, and that matter is now ready for the board's decision.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Brittany Glass's request to lift the suspension of her gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board today is Joshua Lewis's request for reconsideration of the denial of his gaming employee occupation permit renewal application. By way of background, I'm told Mr. Lewis is in the room today in the event any of the board members have any questions. I'll proceed at this point through the factual recitation.
Give me a second. Should I have Mr. Lewis come forward so he can comment?
Normally on a documentary petition, we wouldn't unless there would be specific questions of the board.
Fair enough. Thank you.
In May of 2017, Mr. Lewis submitted a renewal application for his gaming permit so as to allow him to continue working as a surveillance officer at Sugar House. In November 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel recommended denial of the application based on his failure to provide documentation regarding the filing of his 2013 and 2015 federal income tax returns, as well as verification of compliance with Pennsylvania Department of Revenue requirements. After receiving OEC's recommendation for denial, Mr. Lewis satisfied the Department of Revenue issue along with submitting his 2013 federal tax return. However, after being given several opportunities to resolve the 2015 federal tax issue, he was still non-compliant. Therefore, on May 2nd, 2018, the board denied Mr. Lewis's renewal application. After receiving the order of the board here in early May, Mr. Lewis provided his 2015 federal tax return. Thereafter, the Bureau of Investigation Enforcement confirmed that Mr. Lewis is now in compliance with IRS tax requirements. As a result, OEC no longer has an objection to the reconsideration of Mr. Lewis's application denial, nor does OEC object to approving his renewal. And that's the matter before the board.
Thank you very much. Before I proceed, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lewis at this time? Hearing none, I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves Joshua Lewis' request for reconsideration of his gaming employee occupation permit denial and grant renewal of his permit.
Thank you.
Second.
Go ahead. Please proceed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Mr. Lewis, I believe you are, do you still have any need to make comment?
Yes, thank you.
We're very welcome.
You're
Very welcome,
You're
sir.
welcome.
You're very welcome.
Dave.
Have a good
Oh,
day.
excuse me,
Oh.
1 second.
Oh.
Yes, one second, I think there was a comment.
Mr. Lewis, we will expect you to be more timely with presenting us evidence in the future.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Petrie has a very long memory.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, sir.
Next, presenting withdrawals and reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good morning. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals or entities: Raymond J. Poncia Jr., the Raymond J. Poncia Jr. Family Trust, Hotel and Casino Management, Inc., Dr. Rosalind Dubs, Fifth Column LLC, and CB POC LLC. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has responded to each of these petitions and has no objection to any of them. As a result, if the board were inclined to grant same without OEC's objection, you'd be doing so without prejudice to each of the petitioners.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 5 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, along with the complete evidentiary record in each matter, have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. Additionally, in each case, the person that is the subject of the report and recommendation have been notified that the board would be taking their matter up today, and that if they can come forward and briefly address the board if they so choose. If any of these persons are present and wish to come forward when their matter is called, I'd ask them to do so. The first report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Ian Blackman. On April 10th, 2017, Mr. Blackman filed a gaming service provider registration application to be a poker consultant at Parks Casino. His role as a consultant would require him to be on the gaming floor at Parks for at least 30 hours a week, bringing people into Parks to play poker and helping improve or increase the business in their high-limit poker room area. On September 12, 2017, the Office of Enforcement issued a notice of recommendation of denial indicating that Mr. Blackman is not suitable for a gaming service provider registration. Specifically, in 2009, Mr. Blackman pled guilty to conspiracy to promote gambling for his part in a sports betting ring run out of the poker room at the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City. That occurred during 2006 and 2007. Mr. Blackman requested a hearing, which was held November 1st, 2017. Enforcement counsel appeared at the hearing, offering testimony and documentary evidence about the past criminal conduct by Mr. Blackman. Mr. Blackman also appeared at that hearing and testified on his own behalf. During his testimony, he did not deny the facts presented by enforcement counsel. Rather, he testified to the conduct since his conviction, stating he's completed all the requirements of his sentence, and therefore just simply wishes to obtain this employment. He further indicated that he was basically naive relative to his involvement in the Borgata sports betting ring and didn't know that some of what was occurring was illegal. Subsequent to the hearing, a report and recommendation was issued by the hearing officer recommending that the board find Mr. Blackman both eligible and suitable to receive a gaming service provider registration. Enforcement counsel filed exceptions to the report and recommendation, disputing Mr. Blackman's suitability. Upon review of the matter by the Office of Chief Counsel, our office believes that even if Mr. Blackman's gaming service provider application were granted, it would be appropriate for the board to require that he also obtain a gaming employee permit, as he'll be working on the gaming floor interacting with gaming patrons. Because Mr. Blackman is ineligible to receive a gaming employee permit, having a gambling conviction within the past 15 years, it's a statutory prohibition, he would not be eligible to receive that gaming permit, and as a result, the Office of Chief Counsel believes and recommends to the board that it would be appropriate to adopt the findings of fact in the report and recommendation but deny the request given Mr. Blackman's requirement that he be licensed as a gaming employee, and he is statutorily ineligible to do that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding Ian Blackman's gaming service provider registration in part, but not adopt the recommendation of the hearing officer approving Mr. Blackman as a gaming service provider, as his duties would also require a gaming employee occupational permit, and he has a gaming-related criminal conviction within the last 15 years.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Michael Tran's matter is the next report and recommendation before the board today. Mr. Tran was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in August of 2017 to work as a table games dealer at Harrah's, Philadelphia. On February 21st, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Tran's gaming permit after receiving notice that he had been charged with numerous criminal offenses stemming from his participation in a cheating scheme at the Sugar House Casino. Specifically, Tran, while a patron at Sugar House, he worked at Harrah's, but he was a patron at Sugar House, conspired with Brittany Holmes, a table games dealer at Sugar House, to cheat while playing mini baccarat. Mr. Tran would lose a wager, Ms. Holmes would not collect the losing wager, and surveillance showed that over a 14-day period of time, Ms. Holmes failed to collect approximately $56,000 of losing wagers for Mr. Tran, depriving Sugar House of that revenue. As a result of these allegations, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. Tran's gaming permit. A hearing in this matter was held on March 13th, 2018, pursuant to the board's regulations. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared at that hearing, offering testimony and evidence of the scheme that I just outlined. Mr. Tran did not attend that hearing, and therefore no mitigating evidence was put into the record. Based upon the evidence received, the hearing officer recommends that Mr. Tran's suspension remain in effect.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Michael Tran's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter pertains to a request for removal from the self-exclusion list. Pursuant to the findings of fact in the report and recommendation issued in this matter, on August 6, 2016, an individual with the initials JB entered Sands Bethworks and requested to be placed on the self-exclusion list for a period of 5 years. A board casino compliance representative who placed JB on the list testified at the hearing that was held in this matter that he conducted the mandatory interview of JB and completed all of the required paperwork and procedures. The casino compliance representative further testified that JB did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs and did not appear to be coerced into placing himself on the list. Furthermore, put into the record was a signed acknowledgement form whereby JB selected a 5-year self-exclusion term. At the hearing, JB testified that at the time he was suffering from an alcohol addiction and that played a part in his decision to place himself on the list, and he now wished to remove himself from the list, although 5 years had not yet passed. Ultimately, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that JB remain on the list for the duration of the 5-year term he selected, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding JB's petition for removal from the voluntary self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Kareem Andrews' report and recommendation is the next matter before the board today. In September of 2017, Mr. Andrews submitted his application to work as a shipping receiving attendant at the Valley Forge Casino, which requires a non-gaming registration, as he could come in contact with gaming-related devices while working in the shipping and receiving area. On October 29, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice recommending denial of Mr. Andrews' application based upon his criminal record and fees owed to the court from several drug-related convictions. Mr. Andrews disclosed 5 arrests on his applications, all of which were drug-related offenses and some of which were felony charges. He later amended his application to include 9 additional arrests, which did not result in convictions. A hearing was held on February 13, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Mr. Andrews also appeared and testified on his own behalf. Mr. Andrews acknowledged being incarcerated for 33 months as a result of his criminal conduct, and also indicated and put into the record documentation showing that he successfully completed his prison sentence, several programs, rehabilitative programs, while incarcerated, as well as successfully completing his parole, which included outpatient drug treatment. Mr. Andrews testified that during his incarceration he obtained a GED and participated in numerous programs. He further testified that after he was released from prison, he obtained an automotive technician degree and has been working at Valley Forge for the past 4 years in an unlicensed position, back of house in a kitchen area. It was his hope that in securing this new position, which had a higher wage, that he would be able to improve his income and better support his family. After taking all of the evidence into consideration, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that, in fact, Mr. Andrews' permit be approved, or registration be approved, and he be issued a non-gaming registration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding Kareem Andrews' non-gaming employee registration described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Patrick Mullen. In August of 2017, Mr. Mullen submitted his gaming employee occupation permit seeking work as a security officer at the Mohegan Sun Pocono Casino. On December 8, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel issued a notice recommending denial of Mr. Mullen's application due to a 2006 conviction. Specifically, Mr. Mullen was charged with misdemeanor bank larceny after he opened a credit card in his brother's name, utilized the credit card, and accrued a balance in excess of $6,000. As a result of that conduct and conviction, he was sentenced to probation. He was ultimately released early from his probation after fulfilling all of the requirements. Mr. Mullen requested a hearing, and it was held on February 14, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel attended the hearing and put it in documentary evidence relative to Mr. Mullen's conviction, while Mr. Mullen testified that he believes he is suitable for a gaming employee permit, and put into the record to support that contention recommendations and character references from the mayor of his hometown, which I believe is Sugar Notch, Pennsylvania, an employee performance review and character reference from a former work supervisor at the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, where he was employed for 33 years. And also, Mr. Mullen at that hearing expressed remorse for his conduct, and also outlined that he is taking care of a relative who has a family illness, and as a result sought disemployment and overnight work hours so he could be at home during the day. Upon hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that Mr. Mullen be issued a gaming permit, notwithstanding OEC's objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Patrick Mullen's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you, gentlemen. Sue Hensel, Director of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be 1 slot machine operator license renewal, 2 video gaming terminal manufacturers, 1 video gaming terminal supplier, 1 principal affiliate, 703 principal key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants, and 3 gaming-related gaming service provider qualifier applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 9 gaming service providers. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the Sands Bethworks Gaming LLC Category 2 slot machine operator license. The licensing renewal process for this entity is now complete. In addition, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has finished its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the Category 2 license for Sands Bethworks Gaming LLC.
Thank you.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the renewal of Sands Bethworks Gaming LLC's Category 2 license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is consideration of a video gaming terminal, or VGT, manufacturer and supplier licenses. We have 2 manufacturers and 1 supplier applicant. The manufacturer applicants are IGT and Novomatic Gaming Industries GmbH. The supplier applicant is Novomatic Americas Sales. Each company is currently licensed in good standing with the board. Under the Gaming Act, the board may use an abbreviated process to consider the application of an already licensed manufacturer or supplier. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, and the Bureau of Licensing have reviewed the applications and the status of these companies as licensees with the board, and I have provided you with the results of those reviews. I have provided you with draft orders for the applicants and ask that you consider the companies for licensure, beginning with the applicants for VGT manufacturer licenses, IGT and Novomatic Gaming Industries GmbH.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal manufacturer licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
I next ask for your consideration of the order for a VGT supplier license for Novomatic Americas Sales LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal supplier license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, for your consideration is a principal affiliate application for Franchise Merger Sub, Inc. Franchise Merger Sub, Inc. is a Delaware corporation created to facilitate Penn National Gaming, Inc.'s acquisition of Pinnacle Entertainment, Inc. I have provided you with a background investigation and suitability report for the company and ask that you consider a motion approving the licensure of Franchise Merger Sub, Inc.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal affiliate license for Franchise Merger Sub, Inc. as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is approval of principal, key employee, and gaming-related gaming service provider licenses and qualifications. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 4 principals, 3 key employees, and 3 gaming-related gaming service provider qualifiers, including an affiliate. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses and qualifications.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee and gaming-related GSP affiliate and qualifiers as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 7 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants temporary principal and key employee accreditations described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 478 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 173 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the gaming employee occupation permit and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration, there was a recommendation of denial for gaming service provider applicant Gold Star Jets, Inc. The applicant was notified that it was being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with an order addressing the applicant, who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denial.
Enforcement Counsel continues to request denial in this matter.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board deny the gaming service provider application as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are withdrawal requests for gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 27 gaming and 5 non-gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify Heritage Flooring LLC. I ask that the board consider the order approving this gaming service provider for certification.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the application for a gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration, are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 8 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Susan. Next up will be the Office of Enforcement Counsel. You can come forward, but we're going to take a brief recess before we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesus. I've been there. done that.
Yeah, no.
All right. Next up is the Office of Enforcement Counsel. As we begin with that agenda, I'd like to ask everyone addressing the board to please state and spell their name for the court reporter. Also, anyone other than attorneys must be sworn before speaking. Cyrus, you may proceed.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 10 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 1 consent agreement, 3 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 4 involuntary exclusions. The first matter on that part of the agenda is the board's consideration of a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association doing business as Hollywood Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Tamara Haken. Representatives from Hollywood Casino are present. At this time, I request that those individuals introduce themselves, and anyone here not as an attorney, please stand and be sworn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. Alex Vizda, ALEX, HVI-ZDA.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, board. Dan Im, IHM. I do.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Tamara Haken, Haken, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This proposed consent agreement involves an underage violation at Hollywood Casino. On February 11th, 2018, PGCB Bureau of Compliance was notified that an underage violation had occurred at Hollywood. On that date, it was discovered that an underage individual had entered the casino at approximately 2:54 a.m., presenting the identification of another individual as her own. She was on the gaming floor for approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes, during which time she gamed at various slot machines intermittently for approximately 50 minutes of that time. She then exited the casino and attempted to re-enter a few moments later, but was denied because she did not present any identification. She was seen returning to the parking garage where she was handed identification to use by a companion, which she then tried to pass as her own at the security podium. Because she was observed accepting the identification card from her companion, she was apprehended. The Pennsylvania State Police arrived and issued the individual a citation. Both the underage individual and her accomplice were evicted from the casino until July 7, 2019. A written warning was issued to the security officer that allowed the underage individual access to the gaming floor. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board approve this consent agreement between the parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Hollywood Casino shall pay a civil penalty of $10,000. Also, within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Hollywood shall pay the board an administrative fee of $2,500 in connection with this matter. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them at this time.
Are there any comments from Hollywood?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Alex Vizda, Director of Compliance. These BART ID issues are definitely difficult. We have about 80,000 cardings each quarter. In this case, the individual did present a valid ID. It was not her ID. While normally in these cases we have our security team members, they'll go right to a final written warning. In this case, since it was a valid ID and the video showed that the security team member did follow all of our directions about checking the ID, looking at it, looking at the person in front of them, she just was incorrect in her assessment that this was that person. I do want to note, though, that since this happened back in February, we haven't had a single minor incident since then. And just last week, our security team hit 100 days without any minor incidents. And so every single person in our security department got a $100 bonus in their paycheck. So we're happy with that, but we'll keep working on these BART ID incidents.
I have a question. Just curious, when you talk about a minor incident, I'm just curious about the terminology. No, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not a play on words. That's too easy. Does that mean that no one successfully got in?
Of which we have knowledge, yes.
But is there some notion of how? I'm just curious. In that same period of time, do you keep track of how many minors you turned away?
Yeah.
Keep track. Yep.
Dan Im, IHM. We've had, year to date, we've had 126,000 people that we've checked IDs. Of those, we had 415 that were minors that we turned away at the entrance. And we also had 560 cases where we turned people away because either one, they did not have an ID at all, or they had an expired ID, which probably represents about 80% of that 560 people that we've turned away. So again, year to date, we had exactly 415 minors that we've turned away at the turnstile at any one of our locations.
I'm doing this mostly for our education. Really has very little to do with your case. When you say 400 whatever minors, are these people who just tried to get in using a phony ID, or just tried to get in and didn't realize they weren't allowed to be there?
It's both. It's because we have the track. In some cases, we have people that bring in minors and try to come into the entrance because they're not sure which entrance to take.
Okay.
Into the track side. Some of that is fake IDs that are caught, and some, like in this case, people use somebody else's ID and they're caught before they.
I guess what I was just curious from your experience, when you have whatever numbers of hundreds of minors that you turn away, how much of them are trying to deceive you? As opposed to the things you describe. I don't need exact numbers. I'm just trying to get a flavor, as opposed to people trying to get to the track who didn't realize where they were or didn't understand that you couldn't be under this age to get in there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the deception ones are not a huge amount of them, and just in general, the amount of minors we've had to turn away has decreased substantially over the last couple of years. I know, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before that the board did a publicity campaign. There was a billboard on 81 North about the consequences of underage trying to get into a casino. And so it has come down substantially. You know, kids will be kids, though, and they're always going to try. What we do is whenever we have a minor turn away from an entrance, the security officer radios to surveillance. It goes out to all the security team members, and it is broadcast to surveillance so that they get eyes on that person until they come off the property. So by way of example only, there was another one in February where a gentleman wanted to bring his son to the steakhouse, which is in the middle of the gaming floor, so anybody under 21 can't go there. He was turned away from the valet entrance, our main entrance, and the gentleman and his son tried to go in at the second floor entrance, and we were able to stop them there and explain to them it's not how you get there, it's the fact that you can't come on the floor at all. So it's a lot of that, like Dan said, with the track being 18, and it brings out a lot of families. Sometimes they'll just want to come in to get the kid an ice cream or something like that, and we have to explain, you know, even though the kid is 6 and holding your hand, they still can't come in on the floor.
I don't want that 6-year-old playing the slots. Thank you very much. Are there other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount View Thoroughbred Racing Associates described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next 5 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of 3 non-gaming employee registrations and the suspension of 2 gaming employee occupation permits which were issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we'll provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Good morning. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for revocation involving Conchita Davenport. Ms. Davenport was employed as an environmental services worker at Rivers Casino and registered as a non-gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint to revoke Ms. Davenport's non-gaming employee registration after she was observed taking the cellular phone of a patron on January 2nd, 2018. The cellular phone was recovered and returned to the patron. Ms. Davenport was terminated for her actions. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board consider the revocation of Conchita Davenport's non-gaming employee registration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Conchita Davenport's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, T-E-P-P-E-R, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to revoke Matthew Boerer's non-gaming employee registration. While working as a bartender at Mount Airy, Mr. Boerer engaged in a scheme to defraud Mount Airy of money and instead divert it to his tip jar. As a result of this conduct, Mr. Boerer was criminally charged and pled guilty to 1 count of disorderly conduct. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration of Matthew Boerer.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Matthew Boerer's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint to revoke Paul DeVal's non-gaming employee registration for engaging in unsuitable behavior by not ringing up all sales and taking money that belonged to Sugar House Casino while employed there as a fast food cashier. Mr. DeVal was terminated from Sugar House Casino for his actions. He is not currently employed in Pennsylvania's gaming industry. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the board revoke Mr. DeVal's non-gaming employee registration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Paul DeVal's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Sarah Kolesar, K-O-L-E-S-A-R, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Ray Ann Sims for being arrested and criminally charged with a felony criminal trespass offense and a misdemeanor simple assault offense that stemmed from an incident where Ms. Sims went to a residence of another person uninvited and entered into a verbal and physical altercation with that resident. According to the criminal docket, the charges are still pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the gaming employee permit issued to Ms. Sims.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Ray Ann Sims' gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, G-A-B-R-I-E-L-L-E, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint seeking the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Long Tong. Mr. Tong is a dealer at Valley Forge Casino Resort in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, accused of knowingly accepting $4,000 worth of counterfeit $100 bills from an acquaintance while dealing Spanish 21 blackjack at Valley Forge on November 7, 2017. He was arrested on February 8, 2018, and currently his felony-related criminal charges related to this incident are pending. Valley Forge has suspended Tong's employment pending order of the board. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the gaming employee permit issued to Long Tong.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Long Tong's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
Ashley Gabriel, G-A-B-R-I-E-L-L-E. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition for the exclusion of Daniel Lewis. Mr. Lewis has a history of disrupting gaming operations at Sugar House Casino in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Parks Casino in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, which resulted in his permanent eviction from Sugar House and a temporary eviction from Parks. During the last 2 years, Mr. Lewis has panhandled on the gambling floor at Sugar House, removed his bet after the wager was determined to be a losing wager while gaming at Sugar House, violated the Sugar House eviction 8 times, failed to follow the rules of the game while playing craps at Parks, and was found intoxicated at Parks on 2 occasions. Mr. Lewis was cited with defiant trespass 4 times for violating the Sugar House eviction. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Daniel Lewis.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the addition of Daniel Lewis to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Okay.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Brad Reed. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Reed on the exclusion list due to an incident that occurred on October 8, 2017. On that date, Mr. Reed punched the monitor of a slot machine, causing it to shatter. This was at Rivers Casino. Mr. Reed was charged with criminal mischief by Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. He pleaded guilty to that charge on November 16, 2017. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Brad Reed on the board's excluded persons list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Brad Reed to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Once again, Sarah Colasar with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Eric Golden. On November 21, 2017, Mr. Golden engaged in cheating while playing blackjack by capping his $25 bet with a $25 chip after the winning hand had been determined. As a result of this action, he received $50 to which he was not entitled to, prior to security personnel being notified of his action. While security personnel escorted Mr. Golden from the gaming floor, he dropped 2 bags of marijuana on the casino floor and was subsequently charged with 1 count of misdemeanor marijuana possession. Mr. Golden paid restitution in the amount of $50 and was issued a permanent ban from the Meadows Casino. As a result, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Eric Golden on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Eric Golden to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Linda Molinaro. On September 22, 2017, Ms. Molinaro was charged with 1 count of misdemeanor theft of lost property for picking up an envelope from the floor of the Meadows Casino that contained approximately $1,200 to $1,500 belonging to another patron. Ms. Molinaro was issued a permanent ban from the Meadows, and restitution was not paid. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Linda Molinaro on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Linda Molinaro to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you all. That concludes today's business for this meeting. Our next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 27th at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Easy.